This podcast contains information and details relating to suicide. We urge anyone struggling with their emotions to contact Lifeline on 13 11 14, 13 11 14, or visit them at lifeline.org.au. A 24-year-old devoted mother of two, fleeing a violent relationship.
That's my mum. I'll see you soon.
Bags packed. Car running. Her daughters strapped into the back seat.
Mum told me that she needed to go back inside to grab something.
Panic.
Amy's dead, sir. Well, Amy's dead, eh?
Confusion.
Well, about 5 minutes, they said, no, it's a suicide.
100% this is a murder scene.
What do you think is really the honest truth about Amy?
The truth about Amy.
Episode 17.
Well, welcome back. I'm Liam Bartlett.
And I'm Alison Sandy. This week we return to the Wild West. We've touched on the places we've gone to before, like Perth and Serpentine, but I realise a lot of our listeners may not know a terrible lot about Australia's largest, at least in area, state. And I think it's important due to the level of detail we're going into for this investigation, particularly in relation to the police and political culture. So, what do you say, Liam? Do you want to give them a bit of background about living in WA and the climate here?
Yeah, okay. Well, where do I start? Now, Wild West, Al, I'll take that as a compliment on behalf of all the other West Australians. Let's begin with that. But let's just do a broad brush. Okay, start with the geography. As you mentioned, WA is Australia's largest state. We've got something like 2.6 million square kilometres, a little under 100,000 square miles in the old language. So that's about a third of the entire nation of Australia. Larger than any state in the United States, larger than Texas. Can you believe that? Bigger than Texas, but a little bit smaller than Argentina. Just for a little trivial factotum. We only have a population, though, of around about 3 million. So to give you some context, Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, is almost 3 times that, followed by Victoria, that comes in at about 7 million, and Queensland, your joint, Al, 5 million. 5 million compared to our 3 million. Well, we're a little bit over 3 now, I think, but, which just goes to prove, quality is not always on the Gold Coast. You know what I'm saying? Just for a little bit of Australian, parochialism. But despite this, WA is the richest state in Australia because we produce almost half of Australia's goods in exports. And obviously through the resource sector, we generate billions of dollars.
It seems like because of the large landmass and the smaller population that it's a bit tighter, like people know people more and there seems to be...
Yes, true. It can be very cliquey. You're right.
Also, I had, and again, tell me if this has any truth in it, but one top businessman from here told me recently how success here can really be about not upsetting Perth's Powerbrokers. There's this tight-knit, as you talked about, this clique. And, I know the police are probably seen as an arm of that. I mean, as they are in many capital cities, obviously the media and the mining industry. So anyway, I guess the only reason I say that is because it makes it much more impressive given how careful people are not to upset other people because of the repercussions that we have so many people speaking out on Amy's case.
I think that's right. And the legal grapevine is so much smaller in Perth, which I think makes a big difference. So that traditional, if I can put it this way, boys' club, but I don't mean that in a gender way because I think there's plenty of women involved these days in those top echelons of the legal circle. But I think that very much exists, and I think a lot of them protect each other. When I say protect each other, a lot of them just won't speak out because they don't want to get involved, because they don't want to be seen to be critical of their fellow, legal brethren. even though they might be on the other side of the bench, if you know what I mean. And I think that very much happens in Perth, very much a product. It happens in Sydney and Melbourne as well, but you notice it more in Perth. And you know, that comes back to what you're talking about. I think that sort of power base, and I think that's why it's so impressive that a lot of people have been prepared on a legal footing, or people who continue to deal with people high up in the legal circles have been prepared to speak out on behalf of Amy Wensley. I think that's been terrific.
Yeah, it really is. And I think what we're finding in this season, Liam, is, and later in this episode, is the fact that those people who are in the know, involved, credible people with good reputations, maybe not necessarily a member of the cool club, you know, because there's always a bit of a cool club in every city, but that they're willing to keep going at it because they believe in it too. And I think that's been really heartening.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more.
So let's discuss again the reason we've once again assembled in Perth.
I'm really excited about this and letting our listeners hear some of these people. The first person we caught up with is somebody whose appearance I think was well overdue.
Well, we've certainly heard a lot from him, but yes, this is the first time we've spoken with him directly. But he was worth the wait, Liam.
Yeah, absolutely. And just by way of background, Professor Tim Ackland did his PhD at the University of Western Australia back in the 1980s as a tutor, working his way up to professor. Now, his career spanned something like 45 years, and at the time he was recruited to assist with Amy's case. This is important. He was being called upon regularly by WA Police and other authorities to provide expert advice in the area of biomechanics. So I began the interview by asking Tim more about that.
Can you outline the extent and the depth of your experience in sharing forensic cases details with authorities around Australia? Give us an idea of what you've been associated with.
Yeah, so in addition to my work as a teacher and a researcher at University of Western Australia, I also undertake consulting work. Most of it's in the sphere of people being injured at work and applying the biomechanics knowledge that I have to those situations. But on occasions, I've been asked to undertake consultancies for the police and coroners in various jurisdictions around Australia, in order to try to work out or try to give some indication as to whether the scenario that they have seen or come across could have been caused in one way or another.
So mostly workplace insurance claims.
Yes, that's right.
Working out who's in the right and who's in the wrong.
Yes, and could a person have injured themselves in the manner that they've said and ended up with the injuries that they've eventually got.
But when it comes to the difference between that and cold cases, especially involving homicides around Australia, it must be pretty confronting.
It is confronting. I won't deny that. But my background in anatomy and applied anatomy has, and dealing with deceased persons has helped me to work through that evidence, that visual evidence in particular, and remain scientific and as much as I can.
How many cases do you think you've looked at criminally, Professor?
Criminal cases, probably about 15 to 20 criminal cases, yeah.
So you've had a fair breadth of experience in terms of knowledge and information shared.
Yes.
And who approached you initially to look at Amy Wensley's case?
So I was initially approached by some officers from the homicide squad. They asked me some questions and showed me some photographs and said, could I make a determination? And I said, no, with that information alone, I couldn't do so. Then a little bit of time went by, and then I got a call from the State Coroner's office and asked if I would be happy to look at some of the evidence that they have available and to give my preliminary views. They were particularly interested to know if I could give a determination from my perspective on the basis of that information alone.
So what was the essential brief? What were they asking you to try to ascertain?
They asked me if I could make a determination of whether Amy had committed suicide in the manner in which the detectives who were on the scene had suggested, or whether this was indeed some other form of homicide.
So your advice was going direct to the coroner?
At that point, yes. At the same time, they asked if I would interrogate the various witness statements, the information from forensic scientists, and to see if there were any inconsistencies in that information, which I was able to write a report in 2018, I believe, and sent that report to the state coroner.
So just to be clear, you were looking at the biomechanics of this in Amy's case?
Yes.
Whether or not she could have potentially shot herself if someone else had done it, etc., but also surrounding that, crime scene photographs, witness statements, as rare as they were on the ground from that night.
Yes.
And you also, as I understand it, you travelled to the location.
So this occurred later, and on the basis of that report that I wrote, I believe the state coroner then asked the cold case squad of the West Australian Police to allow me to go and do a reconstruction and simulation of the events that supposedly took place on that particular day. And that was the basis of my second report, which was for the WA Police.
So essentially you had to do cracks at it, didn't you? First, your role was with the coroner's court, and then, as you say, with the cold case squad, the homicide squad. So you really did a deep dive, as it were.
Yes, as deep a deeper dive as I could do, given the circumstances. Yes.
But in the whole case, you've probably been privy to the entire sort of caseload of information as it is available. You would be not an orphan, but you would be one of the few.
I guess so. Nothing was withheld from me that I know of in making my determination.
And in terms of determinations, have you ever had a case where you've been in error, even in hindsight, in terms of your assessment, your determination?
I only go on the facts that are presented to me, and using my science background, what is the likelihood of the facts being consistent and true? In many cases, I may not be privy to all of the facts, but I think in this case, nothing was withheld from me that I know about.
I guess the point I'm getting to, Professor, is your track record is pretty good.
If you like to put it that way, yes.
I mean, there's not been a case that you've looked at so far, even with a rear view mirror, where you've been proven to be wrong with your assessment.
Liam, with respect, I've not been proven wrong. It's sometimes the decision maker, be it the jury or the judge, weights my evidence differently to the way I weight it. So let's say decisions can go against my recommendations, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Understood. But scientifically, your results in your assessment have not ever been proven to be inaccurate.
Not in those cases that I've looked at, no.
So when you first looked at Amy's case, was there any particular thing that stood out for you? Was there one thing that looked unusual or extraordinary?
There were about 20 things that looked unusual and extraordinary. There was so much inconsistency in the witness statements and in what people had said had occurred, and the evidence such as it was that I was presented with. So the whole thing from the start did not ring true, and it's unfortunate that those various witnesses had not been interrogated correctly or properly at the time.
Is it fair to say that not much of it made any sense?
Not much of the witness statements information made sense to me. The only thing that made sense was the report of the attending uniformed officers, who were the first people on the scene apart from those witnesses.
The first three constables.
That's right.
Professor, the witness testimonies, particularly from Gareth Price and David Simmons, what did you make of those?
They had plenty of time to get their story straight, but when it came to what they witnessed when they walked into the bedroom, and David Simmons was apparently the first person to go into the bedroom, followed sometime later by Gareth Price, those stories did not match up.
So there were still glaring inconsistencies. Is that fair to say, or am I overdoing it?
There were inconsistencies once they described what they saw when they went into the room. They were quite consistent with the story that they were suggesting, that they were both standing out by the car with the children in the car, and they both heard a loud bang. That part of it was consistent between the two of them.
Can we drill down a little bit on that room?
Yes.
Can we talk about the bedroom? Because as I say, you had the benefit of being allowed back into that room, Amy's bedroom, at a later date in order to do some of your tests and some of your simulations.
Yes, that particular house was occupied by a third party who were very generous in allowing us to go back and do our recreations and simulations. As you walk through the house, you come to the main bedroom. There is a door into that bedroom which opens into an alcove. The bed is on the left-hand side as you're facing that, and straight ahead is a wardrobe. So the little alcove is bordered by the wardrobe on the far side, a wall, and the door. The bed is off to the left, as I say.
Can you recall with clarity when you went in there to start those tests, what it looked like and how you felt about what had happened?
Yes, we were very fortunate, even though the detectives shut the scene down and declared it a suicide, and therefore there was no opportunity for proper forensic photographs, etc. We're very fortunate that one of the attending uniformed officers took photographs at the time. So we were able to set the room up pretty much exactly the way it was as seen in those photographs.
It was Constable Roberts, I think.
Yes.
So from his photographs, you sort of pieced it together.
Yes.
And what conclusion did you come to?
So my conclusion has always been, from that very first report that I did for the coroner, is that Amy Wensley did not shoot herself.
Definitively?
As definitively as I can be as a scientist. There's always a small percentage of doubt, but no, as definitively as I can be, she did not take a gun and shoot herself in the manner that people have described.
Is there a particular reason which makes you so sure from that bedroom scene?
There are probably half a dozen reasons which, when taken together, mean that, in my view, it would be biomechanically impossible, let's say, for her to have shot herself and then the scene to have been left the way we saw it in those photographs taken by Constable Roberts.
Well, what are the most compelling for you, Professor?
So the most compelling is the position that Amy was found. The blood and other biological material spatter on the wall adjacent to her left side, left side of her head and shoulder. The upright position of her head. The almost horizontal entry and exit points of the wound. The position, most importantly, of her right hand. The other two important bits of information are that even though there was limited forensics taken after this, Dr. Pitts was able to show that there was gunpowder residue on Amy's left hand, but not on her right hand, which was tucked underneath her thigh. And there was transfer blood on both the barrel of the gun and Amy's left hand, but nothing on her right hand. So they're the important bits of information that lead me to my conclusion.
I don't want to sound morbid about this or gruesome, but one thing that's always struck me as highly unusual in this case is the position of the wound on Amy's head, the entry specifically, A, for a person so tiny, and also B, just generally. And correct me if I'm wrong here, I might be completely off the beaten track, but if anyone is going to suicide with a weapon like that, I would have thought the last thing you would try to do is shoot yourself horizontally.
You're right on the mark. If I could take you back to the scenario that was painted by the detectives who were on the scene, who called it very early, in my view, a suicide. They suggested that Amy had held this shotgun with her left hand only out here on her right-hand side and shot herself that way. This was because her right hand was tucked up underneath her buttocks. There's a whole bunch of problems with that. We recreated this scenario with the police officer, who, by the way, was naive to the story. She had not seen any of the photographs, and she acted under my direction. So we supported that shotgun with some strings, and she was able to reach the trigger out here on her right-hand side with her left hand, but she couldn't support the weight and aim the shotgun. It was very, it moved around a lot. And so the detectives were challenged by one of the police officers, and they said, well, obviously she's supported the butt onto the bed or onto the floor and still used this very awkward action with her left hand and pushed the trigger, not pulled the trigger, but pushed the trigger away. Now, all of that does not make sense, because if she had leant over this way towards her right and pushed the trigger, then the exit wound would have spattered blood high up on that wall. She would have probably fallen over as well onto the right side, and the gun would have been out to the right-hand side. But this is a nonsense. This is a fiction. It cannot have happened that way, and the reason for that is because Amy was found sitting upright in the alcove. Her head was upright, leaning against the wall. Blood spatter and other material was next to her left ear, left side of her face, and down by her shoulder.
So almost horizontally.
Yes, the entry and exit wound, we didn't have good forensics, but the physics don't lie. The entry and exit wounds were almost horizontal, probably slightly downward, and the exit wound was near where that blood spatter material was there on that. So the scenario painted by the detectives at the time could not have been possible given the other evidence. The other evidence also includes the fact that if she was pushing the trigger with her right hand, she couldn't have blood material there, and she couldn't have gunpowder residue. So clearly, in my view, if she has committed suicide, she can't have done it in that way. Part of what we tried to do was to look for other scenarios where she might have committed suicide using a different approach. And the most logical approach one would think about would be to use the gun and push the trigger with the right hand, and maybe hold and support the barrel of the gun with the left hand. This means that the gunpowder residue on the left hand and the transfer blood on that left hand would have been there, as was found.
Yep.
No blood residue on the right hand, and no gunpowder residue. It also means she could have probably stayed upright. The trouble with all of that is, when a person is immediately deceased, they can't move things around. They fall. The limbs will fall in that position, and the gun would fall and probably go out to the right, given the action-reaction, Newton's third law. When we did this simulation, the right hand dropped down by her side, nowhere near where it was found and photographed, underneath the thigh and buttock.
How does her arm manage to be tucked under the buttock?
it can't happen, not by her anyway. So these were inconsistencies even with that scenario that I painted, made even worse by Gareth Price, who entered second into the room and said that the gun was lying with the butt by her feet and the barrel by her head. Now, David Simmons says he walked into the room and he did not move the body. So we've got a second witness who says the gun was lying this way. If she'd shot herself, then the blood spatter would be behind, and the gun may have ended up there, but all of the other information is incorrect.
Made no sense.
It made no sense. So on the basis of those things, I was able to discount the suggestion that Amy had killed her either in the scenario purported by the detectives and in the one that sort of made more logical sense if you were going to take a gun and shoot yourself.
Yes.
So the only thing that then made sense, and partly because this trajectory of the entry and exit wound, the trajectory of the pellets, was horizontal but slightly down. The fact that Price said that the gun was placed here led me to conclude that Amy was shot by a third party, and the gun was placed there.
Can we put a figure on it? Because when we're talking about using science, as you do, you're only dealing with the facts as they are, the cold, hard clinical facts. Is there a hard scientific percentage? I mean, when you say you concluded Amy did not shoot herself.
Yes. So in science, we're always dealing with probabilities. We test hypotheses. There are some limitations to our tests, and those have to be acknowledged. And that's why we never say with 100% certainty that A equals B, if you like. So if you ask me for a percentage, I would say that, the 95% confidence that I would have is that my suggestion that she did not kill herself is true. 95% sure.
95%.
But
so it's fascinating because your conclusion and the results of your simulations are almost identical to that of Scott Roeder's experiments. And as you know, Scott Roeder is a similar forensic biomechanical expert who we've brought to Sydney from Los Angeles, has dealt with dozens of American police forces and consulted to a lot of different homicide units in the States. He recreated that bedroom to the centimetre in a studio in Sydney and did exactly the same barrage of tests in his own way and came to exactly the same conclusion that you've come to.
Well, I would hope so, Liam, if he's worth his salt.
Science doesn't lie, does it?
The scientific aspects of this don't lie. The human aspects can be manipulated, let's say.
So then you went ahead and made your final report.
Yes.
And that went to the police.
Yes.
And in that final report, and correct me where I'm wrong here, but you basically said the evidence that you found overwhelmingly suggests that Amy did not shoot herself.
That's correct.
And what was the police reaction to that?
I did not get a reaction from the police at the time. They simply took that and took it to the coroner. And so the next time I encountered the police was in the coronial inquest.
Well, we know what the reaction was from police to get another opinion. It's funny because they didn't bother going for another opinion when they got, say, the psychologist report from the internal police psychologist. Back to you, Liam.
So at the time, the coroner was Evelyn Vicker, and she was so concerned about that that she then referred it to the DPP.
Yes.
As I understand it. And that's still sitting with the DPP.
Yes, that's my understanding.
But Coroner Vicker departed the scene, retired. Then we had the onset of COVID. Eventually, we did have a coronial inquest, and a new coroner delivered an open finding.
Yes, that was the deputy coroner, I believe, and she delivered an open finding, but she did give weight to the evidence of the various experts, and she was, I think the words were, convinced that there was some doubt about the histories that were purported to have happened by the various witnesses. So there was doubt, but for reasons of her own, she could not deliver anything other than an open finding.
Were you surprised?
I was surprised.
You were?
Yes.
Because, again, you have had access, like no one else, to all information, the photographs, the witness statements, and then conducted your own experiments in situ at the crime scene.
Yeah, we must remember that simulations and reconstructions come with a number of limitations. For example, we used a live model, similar size, age, weight, etc. as Amy. We used a replica gun, which was loaded with blank bullets to be exactly the same weight. All of those things are limitations. They have to be acknowledged as limitations. And it just depends on the decision maker as to how much weight they put on those limitations compared to the eventual conclusions that I came to.
Let me ask you this another way. Have you worked on any cases, Professor, where you have made such a definitive conclusion and they haven't gone to trial?
No.
Is there anything about the case, about Amy's case, that troubles you?
Yes, the longer this goes on, it troubles me more and more that I believe an injustice has been done. And it's part of the reason why I'm sitting here today. My job as an expert is to provide the best information I can to the decision maker. If that's the coroner or a judge or a jury, that's my job, and I will do that honestly to the best of my ability. And that's what I do. If the police wish to use me and like what I do, then I'm very happy to work with them. I do a lot of work for the WA Police at minimal cost, let's say, because I feel it's my duty to help.
Well, you have a very good reputation.
Thank you.
Which is one of the reasons why you've earned it. I mean, it's one of the reasons that former coroner Vicker decided, upon the receipt of your report, to forward it to the DPP's office, because it carries weight.
I hope so, yes.
And just a reminder for our listeners here, Al, Evelyn Vicker was the first coroner who was assigned Amy's case. Now, she was another key person in this whole chain who was privy to the details, all the details, and did not agree with the WA Police's conclusion that Amy killed herself. We'll be speaking with her in the next episode. Back to Professor Ackland. I'm asking him about any possible connection that he has with Amy's case prior to officially getting involved. Now, this is important for people living outside Perth, because those of us who live there know how tight the community is, as we've discussed. Even if we don't know somebody directly, we often know of them, or we know somebody else who's had some sort of involvement.
Is there any personal connection for you, Professor? And I don't mean with particular players in this case, in Amy's story, but do you, being exposed to the sort of information and the pictures and all the things that go with it in cases like this, does it have an impact personally?
I try to remain dispassionate as much as I can, but that serves me very well in most of the other cases that I'm involved with. But I guess this one's a little bit different. It's gone on for some time, and I just get the feeling that, you know, the evidence hasn't been weighted in the best way possible for Amy to get justice.
Well, what has to happen, though, scientifically in this case? Because we can't go back and change any of that, shall I say, nightmarish litany of mistakes at the actual crime scene on the night. So that does leave all that potential forensic evidence missing forever.
Yes, that's true.
So how does it progress?
I think it can progress if those various players who were witnesses on the scene have an opportunity to present themselves in a criminal case and be cross-examined and interrogated, if you like, to find out the veracity of their stories and where the holes lied. The holes which I saw in my report, but others need to see that and hear that for themselves.
So what you're suggesting, if I may be so bold, is the DPP needs to take a leap of faith based on the available evidence that's already there in the bottom drawer. Go to trial.
I wouldn't like to tell the DPP what to do. They have their whole series of things that they must check off, but let me say that I would be very pleased to see that happen.
I mean, it beggars belief for me that police detectives who are trained these sorts of things, or even minus the training, just with their common sense, can't come even halfway to the same conclusion.
That was very strange. It was a very strange for me to hear that they were sticking with their story through that coronial inquest and wouldn't budge from that.
But these are the same police detectives who didn't even want to enter the room, who were told by uniformed officers when they turned up on the scene that there was a dead mum in that bedroom, and they didn't even want to go in and have a look themselves with their own eyes.
I can't recall that as being the case, but take your point.
Now, stopping there for a minute, Liam, and you make this point, of course, this was never about WA Police as a whole, because there were so many officers there wanting to do the right thing. The thing that surprises me most, though, is how those ones were punished. The two detectives got a rap over the knuckles, a token gesture. Talk about lack of justice. That's it, right there. How can an organisation whose primary purpose is to instil justice have any credibility when they continue to deny it for Amy and her family?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? I've got to say, though, I don't think we're the only ones who see it this way. In fact, I know we're not the only ones who see it this way because of the enormous feedback that we've had to this podcast. Although many of the other feedback streams might be a bit more diplomatic, the way they put things. But look, towards the end of our interview, I couldn't help lamenting the attitude of authorities' ongoing treatment of Amy's case to Professor Ackland, Al, who, of course, was pretty good about that. He completely understood our frustration.
Do you think that this case is now held up because people who made perhaps erroneous decisions in the first instance 10 years ago don't want to be embarrassed?
I suspect that is the case. People will hold a position and defend that position. That's the way of human nature. I think that there are people who were witness to the events and they won't be changing their story. So it'll be very interesting to see what the DPP does.
It will indeed. But before we go on, as WA Police are no longer answering any more questions from us, I decided to put those questions to WA's new Police Minister, Rhys Whitby. Similar to what we put to Police Commissioner Cole Blanche, they were directed at WA Police's credibility among new evidence of senior officers pushing for a suicide finding no matter what. Here's what his spokesman said in a statement.
WA Police Special Crime Squad has carriage of the ongoing investigation into Amy's death, and there is a $1 million reward for information leading to a conviction of the person or persons responsible. WA Police have been pursuing a number of investigative leads and have committed to presenting any findings to the DPP for consideration. I encourage anyone who can assist and has information in relation to her death to contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000 or online at www.crimestopperswa.com.au.
But I see also, Al, where Amy's aunt, Anna Davey, has also written to the CCC Commissioner, that's the Corruption and Crime Commissioner, John McKechnie, CCing the Police Minister into that letter.
Dear Commissioner McKechnie, my name is Anna Davey and I am writing in regard to the Western Australian Police handling of the investigation into the death of my niece, Amy Wensley, who died in June 2014. As a family, we still have concerns over the adequacy of the police investigations into Amy's death since 2014. By way of background, in November 2019, I wrote to the Corruption and Crime Commission about Western Australia's police mishandling of Amy's death on the night she died and the subsequent investigation by major crime that followed, Operation Jundee. At the time, the Corruption and Crime Commission concluded there was reasonable suspicion of serious misconduct by Detective Kirkman and Detective Weedman and referred the matter back to Western Australian Police Internal Affairs. It was only after a 2021 coronial inquest determined there wasn't enough evidence to conclude Amy killed herself that Western Australian Police acknowledged the detectives made mistakes, but not that they wrongly concluded Amy took her own life. The two detectives each received a warning, but no further punishment, and our family has never received an apology. At the inquest, it was revealed that the officer heading the coronial investigation was instructed by the homicide squad to treat Amy's death as non-suspicious and was then severely reprimanded when she didn't. This is yet more evidence of the extensive mishandling of Amy's case and their bias applied to investigations to try to manipulate a suicide finding. A transcript of the inquest is not available to our family, and we have tried on a number of occasions to obtain a copy, but to no avail. However, I urge the Corruption and Crime Commission to obtain a copy to read the extraordinary bias applied by the police hierarchy for yourselves. It's clear Western Australian Police attempted to cover up mismanagement of Amy's case, which is at best police misconduct. This has never been investigated. We're repeatedly being told now that there's a lot more awareness in Western Australian Police of the sometimes hidden nature of domestic violence than at the time of Amy's death. Police Commissioner Cole Blanche even stated that a case like Amy's was less likely to happen again after the introduction of a 2-day domestic violence course for police to attend and a helpline for more junior police officers to call if they feel their concerns were not being heard by more senior police. However, earlier this year, a police internal investigation found 8 Western Australian police officers did not perform their duty in the lead-up to the Floriat murders, the Bombara case. It does not seem like much has changed since Amy's death. Feeling helpless against an organisation such as Western Australian Police, I sought help from investigative journalists to help uncover all the material required to see Amy's case finally be heard in a criminal court. Their work has been published on Spotlight and the podcast The Truth About Amy. Is this what policing has come down to? Late last year, the Western Australian Police relented following negative publicity about their failure to investigate Amy's case properly and formed a task force to review Amy's case and prepare a report for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. We are pleased about this, but given their approach to Operation Jundee and what they told the coronial inquest, our family is concerned Western Australian Police will continue to perpetuate the very inaccurate theory of suicide, which has now been debunked by 3 biomechanical experts, or find excuses not to support a prosecution. I note with interest that the Corruption and Crime Commission website states that during October 2024 to December 2024, you assessed 573 allegations of alleged minor and serious misconduct by Western Australian Police. That's an average 6 complaints a day. There is clearly a serious issue within Western Australian Police, and it has been frustrating and negatively impacting my family now for more than a decade. I urge you to please undertake a new investigation into Western Australian Police's handling of the case of Amy Wensley relating to Operation Jundee, the homicide squad's attempt to have an officer in charge of the coronial investigation treat Amy's case as non-suspicious, and the obvious bias by senior police officers displayed at the coronial inquest. I request you also oversee the current investigation being undertaken and receive a copy of the brief of evidence when it's provided to the Director of Public Prosecution at its conclusion to ensure Amy's case doesn't continue to be mishandled. Please don't hesitate to contact me to discuss this matter further. Kind regards, Anna Davey.
The CCC replied that the matter would be assessed and they would contact Anna when the process was complete. Meanwhile, as I finished up my interview with Professor Ackland, I couldn't help but marvel at the expertise of someone of his calibre and his credibility had not managed to convince WA Police, even before the inquest, that Amy could not possibly have shot herself. He did well, though, to try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But once again, of course, he emphasised his findings were based on a reconstruction. And fair enough, that's the margin of error, isn't it? That's what he's saying. Look, you know, it can't be perfect because it's a reconstruction. But still, it obviously does bother him that they're not being taken more seriously, particularly when taken into consideration with the other evidence.
95%, Liam. He said 95%. He was sure.
95%, yeah, amazing, isn't it? I mean, for a bloke who's been around this stuff his whole life, 45 years, all that experience, all that expertise. I mean, this guy's seen stuff that, would keep people awake at night. And he says 95%. It's good enough for me.
Well, that's the maximum, because he's always got to account for the margin of error.
You've always got a margin of error, yeah.
As you know, I spoke to Professor Ackland about this too, and this is what he told me.
My original thoughts were that there was so much in the evidence trail that was inconsistent, even down to the witness statements by the people who were there at the time. David Simmons, his friend Gareth Price, David's father as well, Robert Simmons. There was a veneer of consistency, but when I looked with my forensic hat on, it didn't hang together very well. And there were aspects of those witness statements which were contradictory, that weren't picked up by other parties. And that was the basis of my report. It was simply to say these things don't hang together from a logic perspective. We then performed a whole bunch of simulations, and in order to simulate some of them, we had one of the detectives holding the gun or taking the weight of the gun by some strings, and we were simply looking at, in the first example, where the right hand, if the right hand pulled the trigger, where the right hand would have fallen to at that time. We also had the model hold the gun with the left hand to the temple and where that would have ended up. So this was basically just drop straight down, and as one of the experts said, Amy would not have had, after the discharge of the gun, she wouldn't have had any means of moving, and the only thing that would have acted upon her body would have been that of gravity. So we're fairly confident that where the hands fell would have been what would have happened after the discharge if she was pushing the trigger with her right hand and holding the barrel against her temple with the left hand. So that was the first sort of scenario. We did 10 trials. Always do 10 trials just in case you get an outlier. And in every case, the right hand dropped away from her body, the model's body, out to the side, to the right hand side. Certainly not, as in the photograph, tucked under her right thigh up near the buttocks. Certainly not there. Could not replicate that at all. The left hand did fall straight down across her lap, which is what is shown in the photograph as well. So that was the first scenario we tested. Importantly to say that the model we used, the constable, had no prior knowledge of this case. She'd not read any of the reports, and she was acting under my instructions at all times. So she was naive, if you like, to the situation.
Okay, so let's just clarify. So you did the left hand, right hand, both hands. Is that sort of is if she would shoot herself?
That's correct. That would be the most the simplest way in which one could hold a gun in the horizontal alignment against her right temple, and we know that that is how she was shot because of the position of the blood and other biological material spatter against the wall adjacent to her left side of her head and left shoulder. Okay. So we know that the gun had to be in that alignment. It would have been nice if we had some police forensics to verify the actual angle, but from Newton's laws, we know that the biological material is going to follow the path of the pellets and hit that wall on her left side. So also there's an exit and an entry wound, so we know that the gun was held horizontally or near to horizontal out on her right hand side at discharge. So that in my mind there's no doubt about that at all.
Okay, so that the hands fell where they were and that they couldn't be done if it was a self-inflicted gunshot.
That's right.
They couldn't fall in like any other way.
Yeah. The right hand could not have fallen and be tucked under her leg and thigh. It's just impossible. We then tested a scenario put forward by the detectives who attended on the site, who said that yes, the right hand is tucked under the thigh, so she clearly must have used her left hand only to hold the gun and discharge the gun. They were questioned by the senior constable who was there at the time, said, this is crazy, it's impossible. Why would somebody hold a gun with their left hand way out on their right hand side? It is possible to touch the trigger. We've shown that for a person of Amy's size, but they would be pushing the trigger at that point, not pulling the trigger, pushing it, and then it would end up way away on her right hand side after she'd pushed the trigger. But she has to push the trigger against some stationary or some force that's holding the barrel. And if she's just using one hand, well, the whole thing would go out to the right and maybe not discharge at all. So then the detective said, she must have been clearly holding the butt of that gun against the bed or maybe against the floor. If that was the case, she'd be leaning across to her right, and the ejector, the blood and other materials, would have ended up high on the wall, not right beside her head. She may have fallen to the right as well if she was leaning over. So that, in my view, is highly unlikely. We did test the possibility that she could hold the gun in her left hand only, but the model said it was just impossible to do that and to hold the barrel of the gun against her own temple and all that. So it's just impossible. From a mechanic's point of view, why would somebody do something so difficult? I cannot conceive that she would have done that at all.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? The model kind of struggled that whole time with all by the looks of it or by the sounds of it. I think you made a little note in your report that the model seemed to be struggling with any of those sorts.
She could not replicate the scenario that the detectives on scene put forward as their evidence, if you like, of a suicide being committed.
Plus, I mean, even if she did work out a lot, the gun was quite heavy and long, and yeah, it just looked awkward the whole time.
Yeah, it's awkward. It's a longish gun. It's not that heavy. It's 2.5 or so kilograms, and that's quite doable. A person can hold that gun out there, but it's the control of that gun and where do you point it, where is it aiming. But most importantly, since she had to push the trigger rather than pull it, there's nothing to stop that gun from just being pushed away. What's also very important is that there was the pathologist report showed that there was biological material, blood, and also residue, shotgun residue, on Amy's left hand, which needs to be near the barrel to have that residue left there. Certainly not out by the trigger. And importantly, no residue biological material on her right hand, which is tucked under her thigh. So the scenario put forward by the detectives has another bunch of red flags being thrown up there. They did take samples from both of Amy's hands, but they only tested the thumbs of the left and the right hands. But still, there was residue, biological material, blood, etc., around the barrels, and also on Amy's left hand. So again, another red flag against the detectives' proposed scenario.
Yeah, I mean, they even at the inquest, they just after your evidence, they just didn't seem to want to contemplate anything other than suicide.
Yeah, that astounded me actually.
So the other thing, of course, is there seemed to be some talk about how possibly going in and out of the door, right, pushing her body, that sort of thing. But then there seems to be contradicting evidence saying, well, her body can't have been moved much because of, the blood spatter and all the other forensic evidence. So is it feasible that somehow her body could have been pushed, do you think, so that her hand ended up under her thigh after the fact?
Yeah, this was a question put to me by the cold case detectives. So in order to look at that scenario, we had our model seated with both feet up against the door, as you would, imagine someone trying to stop someone coming in the door. After 10 pushes, each time the right knee, which was bent at the time because her feet were up against the door, it flopped down to the right-hand side. Once that occurred, once you tried to open the door, the knee stopped the door from opening more than about halfway. So after 10 trials of that, we were fairly convinced, I was fairly convinced, that the right leg would have gone from a vertical position to a horizontal onto the ground, still bent, but that the door could not be opened more than about halfway, so we marked that position on the floor. We then positioned the hand, so again, if we go back to the first set of tests, the right hand did not fall anywhere near her thigh, it was out to the side. But in order to test this hypothesis, we positioned the right hand where it was found to have been, or to finish up in those photographs. So again, I need to say that this is not where the right hand would have finished. We put it there, and we had one of the detectives open the door with a fair amount of force up to that marked position that we had on the ground. And indeed, each time the door was stopped by the model's knee on the ground. So it really would have taken a lot more force to push it even further. After 10 trials, we could not get that thigh to cover the right hand in any way, as shown in that photograph taken by the uniformed officers who attended site. So
it's safe to say then that that positioning of the hand was in that position when she died, like that didn't move into that position.
That was my conclusion, yes.
I know that we can't really say where the gun fell, particularly because, I mean, the presumption is potentially it was moved. So that doesn't help us. But just with that position of her hand under the thigh, you would think that would have been enough Is that? I mean, am I just looking to basically at this that would be enough to say that there's no way she could have? I mean, highly unlikely, as you say, to have been able to kill herself.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that go along with that, Alison. She can't have moved after the gun was discharged, so she can't have put her hand there. Our tests, our simulations showed that the thigh could not have been pushed over the hand. The lack of biological material and residue on the right hand shows that was nowhere near the barrel at the time. If she had used the right hand to push the trigger, then it would not have finished up in the position that it ended up in. And so all of those things combined tell me that I'm fairly convinced that Amy did not discharge that weapon by herself using her right hand on the trigger, nor could she have done so using her left hand on the trigger. And the reason for that is, the various reasons for that is, you've got to also take into account the horizontal orientation of the gun, which is helped by the spatter on the wall, the location of that, as well as the entry and exit wounds. So all of those things conspire to say that she could not have done it herself.
It seems like you've got enough, right? Am I wrong in that?
In my view, we've got enough.
Well, next week, Al, the first coroner to see Amy's case. Really looking forward to letting our listeners hear what she has to say.
We've got evidence beyond a reasonable doubt she didn't pull the trigger herself. Some people don't agree with that, but that was probably enough for me.
And how Amy's family is coping as WA Police's latest investigation draws to a close.
That's right, we wouldn't be doing all this and reliving it every single time.
If you knew Amy and have information about her death, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at thetruthaboutamy@7.com.au or visit our website 7news.com.au/thetruthaboutamy. You can also send us an anonymous tip at www.thetruthaboutamy.com. Presenter and executive producer, Alison Sandy. Presenter and investigative journalist, Liam Bartlett. Sound design, Mark Wright. Assistant producer, Cassie Woodward. Vodcast editor, Carmen Bensley. Graphic artist, Jason Blandford. And special thanks to Brian Seymour and Jessica Evanson. This is a 7 News production.